Welcome back to another episode of I Called It Long Ago, folks. I knew this would come out. I knew it would happen with this, and I know it's going to happen with a lot more. It seems that Ocasio-Cortez blames a staffer for the embarrassing Green New Deal failure. AOC throws anonymous staff member under the bus for GND's crushing flop. Radical Socialist Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat, New York, has spoken out about her Green New Deal's crushing failure to blame an anonymous staffer for its embarrassing launch. The controversial New York lawmaker, she's not controversial, she's an idiot, appeared on MSNBC's All In with Chris Hayes on Friday to discuss the Green New Deal's humiliating defeat in the Senate this week. AOC's GND proposal was met with widespread criticism when it was launched in February after the loosely disguised manifesto for socialism in the United States promised to eradicate air travel within 10 years and offer a living wage to everyone in America, even if they are unwilling to work. The Green New Deal went down in flames in the Senate with a 0 to 57 vote, and not one of her fellow Democrats backing the proposal. Speaking to Hayes on MSNBC, Ocasio-Cortez threw one of her staffers under the bus in a bid to distance herself from the fact sheet about the GND posted on her congressional website and sent out to news media. According to COR, people roundly mocked the fact sheet, and it was pulled off her congressional site several hours later after even Senator Mazie Hirono, Democrat, Hawaii, seemed stunned, saying eliminating air travel would make it a little hard to get to her state of Hawaii. I've definitely had a staffer who had a very bad day at work and did release a working draft early, so I guess that's what they're seizing on. Despite the fact that she tried to distance herself from the working draft, she doubled down on the wild talk with more apocalyptic rhetoric about climate change. Climate change is different because we have an expiration date, AOC explains. The IPCC report says we've got 12 years to turn it around. She emphasized raising her voice and becoming more animated. 12 years, she continued. My concern is that we're going to be the frog in the pot of boiling water, and we're going to debate and debate and debate and debate. And when we actually pass something, it's going to be a wimpy carbon tax, and our kids are doomed. What kids, Miss Ocasio-Cortez? You're the one who said we shouldn't have any kids. Yes, it is literally socialism, hence the reason she is, in fact, a socialist, because it can't be done without solving economic justice or injustice. I really want this page to quit forcing a refresh. And don't worry about the energy industries which are going to be destroyed, or all those people who are going to lose their jobs. And yes, she did bring up that cow flatulence again. Ocasio-Cortez went on to reference cow flatulence, prompting Hayes to interject. It sounds like ridiculous, but it literally is an issue. It is an issue when it comes to contributing to methane. But that doesn't mean you end cows. It means we need to innovate and change our cow grain from which they feed in these troughs, Ocasio-Cortez said. We really need to take a look at regenerative agriculture, like these are our solutions. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, I'm going to give you the benefit of being alive for 12 years longer than you, possibly 13. I don't know when your birth date is. I don't really care. But I have been alive a lot longer than you. I've been aware of the world around me a lot longer than you. And I can tell you that cows and horses and other large livestock who are grass-fed only still fart. I can tell you it's not the grain they eat. I have a very large breed dog that cannot eat grain. And trust me, she's pretty gassy. It's because they are alive. It's just that simple. You are demanding that we all give up everything that makes our society function. You're demanding that every home in the country be retrofitted to solar, wind, or hydroelectric power on our dime. Because, of course, you don't want to spend your precious taxpayer money that funds your luxury apartment and lavish lifestyle on we peasants. I can tell you, I'm actually looking at solar for mine and my parents' homes not because of your Green New Deal, but because it will help us financially. If you look at all of this, though, it's not going to change the world in 20 years, let alone 12. Maybe you should look to your own party. Look to the Al Gores and Bernie Sanders of the world who have multiple homes, fleets of cars, travel all over the world in those evil airplanes. I remember in the early 2000s when Al Gore was first launching his "we're all going to die" nonsense, after, of course, claiming to have invented the internet. But it came out not long after all of that started that he lives in a sprawling mansion that has the carbon footprint of multiple families, while the evil conservative George W. Bush, who had to have destroyed votes in Florida to win, lives in a cottage in Texas that has alternative energy sources and has a carbon footprint smaller than you would expect for a couple that has no children at home. No one ever talked about that. They still don't. What is the carbon footprint of your life, Miss Ocasio-Cortez? How many vehicles are needed to ensure you get where you need to go? How often do you fly somewhere that you really don't need to be? I mean, I'm sorry, South by Southwest is an arts festival. Why did you need to come make a political speech there? And I pretty much guarantee you didn't take a train, you didn't walk or take a horse. You flew from D.C. to Austin and then flew back because, of course, you had to interrupt an arts festival in Austin to make a political speech. Of course, you chose a very expedient town because Austin is a very liberal town. You didn't come to College Station or Fort Worth or Abilene, where, of course, they're very conservative, to scream at all of we backward idiots about how evil we are. It's the same thing over and over, taken straight from George Orwell's Animal Farm and 1984. The so-called elite impose rule after rule after rule on the world. Look at the pigs in Animal Farm, imposing more and more rules until the horse dies and they can't plow, imposing rule after rule that they themselves do not even consider obeying, until ultimately we're shown that last bit that says all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Look to 1984, or one of the closest visual representations in film, Equilibrium. In Equilibrium, emotion is banned, and the entirety of society drugs themselves regularly to ensure they are not going to feel, they don't become sense offenders. But the people running the entire society have plenty of emotions, plenty of contraband in their offices and homes, because, of course, they are above the law. You tell us we need to do all of these things to avoid economic disaster, yet you live in an apartment that probably has a carbon footprint twice that of my small home. I drive a very fuel economical vehicle. You gallivant around in large SUVs and airplanes. I've not flown anywhere in over a year. I bet you've flown to at least 10 different cities in the last 2 or 3 months. It's this hypocrisy that just gets on my last nerve. And it will until it ends. Because we have Senator Feinstein, who demands we be disarmed while admitting she illegally carried a pistol to and from her work because she had to, quote, walk through a bad area. We have other politicians protected by men with automatic weapons telling us that semi-automatic weapons are evil and we must give them up. We have people like Ocasio-Cortez who live lavish lifestyles and tell us we have to give up beef, give up our cars, give up our airplanes, because the world's going to end in 12 years unless we change society so only she gets to live in the modern era. Orwell, Huxley, Bradbury, all of them warned us about this decades ago. They're all spinning in their graves because so many people ignored the warnings and now have elected a 29-year-old uneducated moron to one of the highest posts in this government. There is somewhat of a silver-ish lining. Apparently her own party wants her out of office because she is embarrassing them right and left. She's putting forth horrible plans that will cost over $100 trillion when combined with the other plans of the Democrats, and she's publishing them on her website, then blaming the staffer. She's telling us we have to eliminate cow farts when she's pictured eating dinner with someone in D.C., eating a burger, which of course means somewhere there had to be a cow raised until old enough to slaughter, and trust me, they're pretty gassy animals. It's just the way of the world. But I'll tell you, Miss Ocasio-Cortez, after the first ice age, I can tell you there were livestock all over the planet. We had cows, horses, we had zebras, we had elephants, and so many other large animals. And all of them have passed gas. since they were first introduced as a breathing, living animal. And we've not seen anything happen since that last ice age. You see, weather and climate are cyclical. How did the world go from an Eden to an ice age when man was still living in caves, scrounging in the dirt? It's not man-made. It is cyclical. And yes, there may come a time when returns to a horrible time. But humans will survive because we are innovative, whereas the animals, which are caught in it, are not. And no amount of posturing, no amount of your carbon taxes and restrictions on emissions are going to do anything to stop it, because we cannot control the weather. Unfortunately, we also cannot control who manages to find their way into the United States House of Representatives, because the Democrats decided they didn't like the guy who was in office and found someone that they thought would be relatable to younger people and primaried out someone in a district that never votes for the Republican. But that's not always the case, and I'll end with this. In late 2004, and I've told this story, I'm going to be very brief on it, but I was laid off in a reduction in force and given a very, very nice settlement, or severance package, if you will. So I could afford to take 2 months off, move home, start school. But I also went out east Texas from my home, rode out several hours on the road to help Louis Gohmert, who is still in office, a great man, went to A&M, so of course how could he be anything but, unseat an incumbent Democrat in Tyler, about as blue as they got until that election. We walked and we walked and we walked for several days, talking to everyone and anyone we could, telling them that Louis was at a certain place where he would be happy to meet with any resident in that he would hopefully later be elected to represent. And we managed to turn a blue district red for the first time in decades out there. So for those watching who feel you may be stuck in a blue district, you're not. But you need to organize, and you need to organize well, and you need to make sure you get the message out. If you live in Ocasio-Cortez's district, and you'll notice I am being very careful to always say Ocasio-Cortez or AOC if it's referenced that way, because of course she uses both, and I wouldn't want her to target me as a racist who doesn't know that I'm apparently supposed to know everything about Hispanic culture and use her entire name. I simply read what's on the page. But if you live in her district, it's not impossible to unseat an incumbent and change the party. There have been seats that have been flipped in the past. There will be in the future. And it's all up to the people living there. So New Yorkers, if you're tired of this child ordering you around, find a candidate who actually could do the job. Organize. Walk the streets. Let everyone you know hear the message. If you don't do it, you won't succeed. If you try, at least you tried. But sometimes you will. But that's enough for me. Make sure to let me know what you think. Just keep the comments classy and keep them civil. We don't learn from arguments. We learn from debates. And that's always the way it's going to be. Make sure to like the video. Make sure to subscribe so you stay up to date with all of my content. I do have several plans for a few rabbit holes to jump down, so you'll want to not only subscribe, but hit the notification bell so you can stay up to date with all of the content coming out in the coming weeks and months. Until then, everyone have a wonderful day.